what was one of the biggest takeaways for you for taking such a large chunk of time off of not drinking?
If there's a chance to optimize your life or optimize your performance or get the best out of yourself, why would you not at least give it a shot?
When I'm into something, unless it's perfect, I feel bad, and it's never perfect. So I end up kind of beating myself up about things a lot.
If I'm trying to always be on, that typically leads to a point where I get burnt out. I'm tired. I'm like, dude, I gotta chill. I have to rest.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for taking part in this immersive listening experience. A meaningful existence is a moving target that, no matter how close, will always be out of reach. We hope this message finds you with an outstretched hand. As we attempt to uncover complex truths, remember, life's toughest questions can be answered if we all just focus on one thing: being good people.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Good People episode 50. Today, I was joined by Jason Anderson. This is his third time on the show. In today's episode, Jason and I talked about his and my experience taking an extended period of time off of alcohol, why you should be stepping outside of your comfort zone, and continuing to try new things as you discover new iterations of yourself. If you guys are watching on YouTube, before this episode begins, please like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on our notifications so you don't miss our weekly uploads. We really appreciate you and any interaction you have with our channel. It helps us grow this thing. Enjoy the show. Well, welcome back to the show, man. This is the third time that you've been on. It's obviously always an honor to talk with you. We should definitely talk more than we do, but we do our best. I would say I probably keep up with you more than anybody else in my friend group.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you having me back on. It's cool. I feel like we have the kind of friendship that's like when you're really friends with somebody, it's like even if you live pretty far away or like you're not connected all the time, you can just kind of like leave off and then catch right back on to where you were before. And I really appreciate that. I appreciate you, and our friendship has been extremely meaningful in the last few years.
Yeah, man. Same to you. And I always think when we're together, we sort of have that conversation of if we just recorded ourselves all the time, we'd have a heck of a podcast because we have the same conversations on here that we do in real life. Yeah.
There's always depth, and I feel like that's really hard to find with other people. So yeah, huge appreciation for that. And I agree. I think these episodes could probably roll forever, but the audience might get tired of listening to me.
Yeah. Well, I know we talked a little bit before we pressed record here, but tell me a little bit about what's going on, man. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing well, staying busy. Life kind of got crazy recently. I popped a big question, asked my girlfriend Kat to be my fiance and my wife to be, I guess is another way to put it. So,
horrible term, by the way, whoever came up with fiance. That word sucks.
Dude, it's terrible. We both said, like, can we just skip this part? Like, I don't want to do the whole, like, fiance. That's one thing I didn't know is that fiance is both parties, but one fiance is spelled slightly different than the other.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, so the guy, I believe, fiance for the female is the one you're typically used to seeing, Fiance with the little apostrophe, and then the male is fiance with one extra E at the end. So things you
very
don't know.
Fascinating stuff. Engaged. I always I haven't really referred to her like this, but after I got engaged, I would just call Callie. I would say she was my intended, and that sounds kind of whack, but I mean, dude, it's better than fiance.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I agree with that.
Well, dude, I just finished up that year of not drinking alcohol. This is something that I wanted to talk to you about, and I'm surprised it hasn't ever come up in conversation. I guess I just didn't really realize that you took an extended period of time off of drinking. You've done that before in your life. So tell me a little bit about that, the inception of why you decided to do it. What did it look like?
Yeah, dude, I did a year and a half, maybe a little over that, fully sober. And all that came back to like my snowboarding years, man. Like for those of the people that are listening in my past, I come from an extensive line of snowboarding from the age of like 12 to 27. I mean, I still snowboard to this day, but there for a while I was doing it professionally, and like pretty much the agenda was like go to the hill, board all day, film some tricks, go back, change, go to the bar. And like, it was like at the time that I was snowboarding full time, this was like 4 or 5 nights out of the week, like maybe even sometimes like whole weeks at a time. It like got so crazy, dude. And like when I was younger, like I could drink and be like, yeah, whatever. Next day, do it again. But by the time I hit like 25, I was like, whoa, like this sucks. Like this hurts. And I like basically I just burnt myself out on it. And I was like, you know what? Like I'm gonna try and do like a month and see what happens. And then from the next thing I know, it was just kind of like this continual thing. And I just let it go. And I made it past a year and I was like, well, there's no reason to stop now. And eventually got to the point where I was like, you know what? Like, I kind of miss like enjoying a drink at dinner. Like I used to be super into like craft beers and IPAs and like the brewing process has always interested me. You know, we vibe on coffee all the time and I find beer and wine and whiskey to be kind of in that same genre of like craft beverage, you know, the process of making it, the different, flavors and profiles that you can pull out of those things became really interesting. And so, eventually once I had done like my year and a half, I was like, you know what? Like, I think today's the day. I was like on a bike ride with some friends and they were like, I think we're going to go to Stone Brewing here in Richmond. And I was like, you know what? Like, that sounds nice. Like I could go for a post ride, just single beer. And so I like reintroduced it into my life. But even to this day, I still have like 1, 2 drinks, maybe a week, if that. And, that's usually good for me. It's just anything else, you know, it's a form of fellowship.
Yeah, I'm curious. My experience when I started drinking again this past year was probably the first 2 weeks of the year. I was in this weird. I was drinking way more than I thought I was going to, and it was like I didn't drink for such a long time that when I finally had it back, I think I drank more days of January than I did it. Like I was drinking a lot, you know, just a glass of wine or whatever with dinner. I never really had more than 1 or 2 drinks at a time. But I'm curious if you had that similar thing happen to you, where when you got back into it, you were like, "This is awesome. What have I been doing?" Sort of thing. And it wasn't even really that for me, as much as it was just like, "Oh, this is something that I can enjoy now." I almost had a harder time drinking responsibly than I did not drinking at all.
For sure. Dude, honestly, no. I still to this day, I think there's one instance where I can count it on one hand. I had 4 drinks and I was like pretty tipsy and like I felt like I was having fun, but I never feel like I need to overindulge at this point. I will say occasionally I'll get on a kick where like I like to have. There was like a week or two in the fall, especially when the vibes were right, that I was kind of on a whiskey kick, and I would do like a whiskey ginger, or like I would try to make like my own old fashioned at home, but I would only have like one a night, and I would do that. Like I think I did that like 2 weeks where I did like 3 nights a row each week, and I was like, I was like, I should probably turn it back a notch. So not because I was abusing it, but I just like, I don't know. I think it's kind of, it just goes in play with everything else I've got going on with the endless training hours and such. I was like definitely feeling even just that little bit in the recovery period. Like I was like, okay, 3 a week is maybe too much. So yeah.
So what you're saying is I'm a bit of a degenerate and I can't control myself. But no, I feel like it was just that initial like buy-in period where I was getting it back.
Yeah, for sure.
Into a regular routine.
I think I definitely do that with other things. Like if I'll take, I don't know, say like a week off the bike or something. When I get back on the bike, I'm like, dude, I gotta ride every day, 2 hours a day. Like this is great. I miss this. And then, yeah. I don't know. It's funny how we have those personalities that like when we latch onto something, we're like, yeah. Like if I tried to slow down caffeine and like came back to coffee, I'd probably be like, dude, like 6 coffees a day.
I know it's the opposite effect. I do this constantly where I'm like, I really got to dial back my caffeine consumption. For example, when I was young, I had a lot of like stomach acid issues. It runs in my family. And I had this bout of some stomach issue pop up last October. And basically I was like, okay, dietarily, I'm going to dial, high acidity stuff back. I'm going to drink a little bit less coffee. And for whatever reason, when I made the decision, it just became infinitely harder for me to stop drinking as much coffee and to like not eat pizza and pasta, like tomato based things. Not to say that I didn't do it, but for whatever reason, I always feel like when I flip the switch in my brain, it becomes harder for me to abstain.
Yeah, dude, that's one that's actually really tricky for me. Is for a long time I like was super strict on added sugars and like cut a lot of that stuff back. But dude, like I grew up in a Southern household, and like at this point I realized like I've got a sweet tooth for life. Like, so if I try to cut that back for too long, and then I come back in and my body gets a taste of that added sugar, man, it's like a pastry every day. Like, but yeah, I don't know. It's funny.
Yeah. Have you heard of the movement Sober Curiosity?
I feel like I've heard it, but I don't know that I understand it.
So I interviewed Linda Hancock. I can't remember what episode it was on the show, but she taught me that I was basically telling her how I didn't really drink any alcohol, and she was like, "You're not some unicorn. People do stuff like that all the time." And it was pretty much like, there's this movement of people called Sober Curious, and I sort of looked into it a little bit, but it's basically describing what we talked about. People that don't have problems, just want to explore, maybe a different way of living outside of regular consumption of alcohol. And I would lump in that framework to the reason why I decided to do the year that I did. It wasn't out of anything other than I just want to kind of see what happens. I did a whole podcast episode on not drinking for a year, and so I don't really want to reiterate those points. But I'm curious for you, what is what was one of the biggest takeaways for you for taking such a large chunk of time off of not drinking?
Dude, yeah. I think to touch on the sober curious thing as we dive into it, I think it's like if there's a chance to optimize your life or optimize your performance or get the best out of yourself, why would you not at least give it a shot? So I think that kind of lends into the idea of sober curiosity. I think you could apply the same idea to like clean eating curiosity or like vegetarian curiosity. It could apply in many ways. People are like curious what it will do for them. I think for me, the biggest takeaway that I got, because when I went without alcohol, I also went completely sober from everything else. And I wasn't really doing much in snowboarding with that stuff other than like smoking some weed occasionally. So like I stopped that as well. But when I stopped any substance at all that could alter my state of mind, essentially, I found the amount of like clear-headedness and how well and how quickly my brain processed things, and like how emotions would come, and instead of me feeling overwhelmed by the emotion, I could actually acknowledge the emotion, greet it, and kind of move past it. So like there was this like unmatched clear-headedness that I discovered through that. And I think obviously it's a motor inhibitor when you're drinking, but there's that lasting like fogginess, that grogginess that continues, especially if you're drinking like at the rate I was drinking when I was in the peak of it. It's like, dude, when you get rid of that stuff, when you eliminate that, your cognitive function is just so much better. Like there's so much enhancement in the way that you can think when you don't have anything else altering the state that you're in. There's nothing else to blame it on.
It removes friction is what I feel like it does, because you're right. For example, last night I had 2 rum and cokes with dinner. I probably had like 2 shots worth of rum and slept great. Everything went fine. I had the drinks maybe 2-3 hours before I went to bed. I'm doing it in a very responsible way. And when you talk about including alcohol in your diet, that's a very good way to do it. A couple hours before you go to sleep, nothing more than like 1 or 2 drinks, good to go. And this morning I felt fine, but there's a little bit of that. I got to shake it off. It takes you a little bit longer to get up and out of bed. Maybe there's a little bit less willpower when it comes to rising and being excited for the day. And I think when you do that, even in small chunks, and over the course of your life, those little days accumulate, and it does add a little bit more friction to whatever you're trying to accomplish. So it's not to say you can't include it, but if you have any means to become a high achiever, and especially if you're already up against a lot of things that are working against you, I think it's a good idea to explore excluding alcohol to some degree from your life, especially if you are anywhere above a normal amount of consumption.
For sure. And yeah. I mean, alcohol is inherently kind of a depressant. So it's like you could be the brightest individual, but if you're overcooking it on the weekends, odds are you come into work on Monday and you feel pretty unmotivated. So yeah, I think just giving it a shot, seeing what it feels like. I guess my question for you is like, because you're a bit more fresh off this. This for me was like, I think like, shoot, it's been two plus 2.5 years now since I did that. What was like for you, obviously, A, what was like the biggest change that you saw? And B, was there anything you noticed? I feel like that was actually positive about having the alcohol in your life.
About adding it back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my experience is very similar with yours. I would say, and I've never done anything in my life that I tried out and I went, this is the thing, or this is the secret, because there isn't anything like that. You know, like I wear barefoot shoes, wide toe box. I take care of my feet. That wasn't the thing. Cutting out alcohol wasn't the thing. Eating X diet wasn't the thing. It's kind of just one of those small incremental changes that you can make that will make some difference. And if you add it to the other things that you do for your health and optimizing it, or your productivity and optimizing it, or your well-being and optimizing it, it does have a significant impact long term. And so I would say I actually didn't realize as many benefits from it until I added alcohol back. And one of the biggest things that I look back on now was I realized at some point during the year, I don't know when it was, that you don't need to drink alcohol to have fun at social events. There's plenty of awesome substitutes, you know, club soda and lime. There's fantastic non-alcoholic brews or beers rather now. And I think just in general, if it's something that you like to do in terms of like the taste or socially, there's good alternatives if this is something that you want to explore. I'm always been very shy. I've always been very, I don't know, awkward at some level for sure, at least socially. And so for me, alcohol has always been a thing that has made it a little bit easier to connect with people and like dance at a party or a wedding. And, you know, that's not uncommon. And I think that, again, at some point during the year, we went to a couple weddings and we went to a couple of social events, and I realized, oh, I can have fun and I don't have to drink. Adding it back, I think all those things that I just mentioned are still very positive benefits of alcohol. You know, if you drink, you know, if you're a little uptight and it's hard for you to unwind, every once in a while having a drink to unwind and loosen up, whether it's socially or at home, is fantastic. And I actually would say this goes even more into something that I've been giving lots of thought to lately. And it's the idea that productivity isn't the end all be all of what it is we're trying to accomplish. And I think that that's a pretty big mistake that a lot of people make, especially when it comes to the self-improvement space, is that when we say optimize, we're not only optimizing for productivity, for work output. It very well could be, especially if you are growing a business or trying to do something that's uncommon. Like trying to grow this podcast. I need to be productive and efficient in my work so that I can dedicate enough time to try to do this thing. But that's not it. I've noticed since I've taken increasingly more focus on what I would consider quote unquote work, things like maintaining my actual career as a fitness coach, trying to grow this thing, and it's almost like a side quest for my career. I've needed to focus even more so on making sure that I'm okay. And that looks like leisure to me, having a glass of wine with dinner with my intended. having a drink when I'm by myself watching MMA, reading and having a drink, I think that there's a time and place for it. And I would argue to say that my life is better with it for that purpose. It helps me manage things a little bit better. It's also forced me to learn that it's all right to not work. Like think of the people who are crazy into fitness. It's like it's probably harder for them to not work out than it is for them to work out when they're sore, just because they've developed that kind of relationship with it. For me, I would say I was never that extreme, but I tend to do stuff like that. When I'm into something, unless it's perfect, I feel bad, and it's never perfect. So I end up kind of beating myself up about things a lot when it comes to work and getting better. And when I started drinking alcohol again, obviously in my mind, I'm like, wow, I'm diminishing my performance in the gym or my ability to train for these athletic goals that I have. And that's not true. It actually enhances my ability to focus on them when I get to it. And so I think that's been an important thing that I've realized from it.
Dude, yes. And oh man, you touched on so many good points there. Wow. I think firstly, the emphasis on like being able to utilize that as a rest switch, because when we try to always be on, at least I notice for myself, like if I'm trying to always be on, that typically leads to a point where I get burnt out. I'm tired. I'm like, dude, I gotta chill. I have to rest. Because I'm a person who's like fueled by movement. I rarely sit still. And like, so having a drink with friends or dinner with friends is a motivator for me to sit still, to take that time to rest, to disengage with everything that's going on in my head about training, work, life goals, and allows me to just like eliminate that, clear the headspace, and connect with people. And that's the life source. Like if we look at all the blue zones in the world, like their life source is not that they're always working super hard. Their life source is that they're always surrounded by community and including each other. And dude, that's the thing is like, I feel like especially athletes, like in our mindset, we're like, oh, like they're going for a drink. Like I have a hard workout tomorrow. Like I can't be around alcohol. Oh, they're going out to dinner, but that's not chicken and rice. I can't go eat with them tonight. It's like you're actually doing more damage than you're doing good. Because I guarantee you, if you went and stayed out a little later and had a drink with your friends rather than going home and cooping yourself up for that 2 hours of the evening, like your recovery score, if you wear like a Whoop band or whatever, will be way higher if you went out and had that interaction with your friends than it would be if you stayed at home. The same thing with the food. Like if occasionally your friends want to go to dinner and like it's pizza, it's not, something that you view as like helping you achieve your goals, like let go of that occasionally. Like go enjoy the time with the people, the investment with the people, switch your brain off, allow for a moment of decompression, a moment of connection, a moment of clarity. And like that fellowship is everything. I feel like that gets you so much further down the line than any of the things that you could do alone, And I think that's such a key thing to remember. If you're trying to be the best and you're trying to be productive and you're trying to be a hard worker, like all of those things are great, but make sure you're setting aside a time for people, for connection, because if you're not, you're kind of missing the point.
Yeah, I've talked about this before. I'm going to misquote myself. I was looking for it here, but I wasn't able to find it. I pretty much define the difference between goodness and greatness, and it's goodness is sacrificing your wants for the wants of others, and greatness is sacrificing the wants or desires of others for your own. And when you want to be an athlete at the highest level, for sure you have to make sacrifices. You do have to go home early. I know I'm playing devil's advocate on what you were just saying, but I'm coming back around to it.
Yeah.
You do have to go home early most of the time. You do have to say no to dinner. I think that there is an interplay here where, yes, sometimes saying yes is actually going to be advantageous for you. But for me, I'm just not willing to sacrifice things like that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that I ever was a amazing athlete and was going to, get somewhere athletically with something specific. But I very much believe in, I can work on my athletic goals and try to push myself as far as I can, but I will never do that at the cost of the people in my life. Simple things like not missing weddings or not missing birthdays. I know you can't always do that, but that's very important to me because that's the action associated with goodness. You know, we talk about goodness a lot on the show. What does it mean to be a good person? I have no idea, but I can tell you what it looks like, and it looks like that. Showing up to people's weddings, going to people's birthday parties, buying a small gift for somebody and giving it to them, and you know, not even telling them it's a big deal, right? Somebody wants to work on something and you support them in any way that you can, you know, whether it be financially or just with encouragement. That's it, right? Those are the things that at the end of your life, if you continue to do those things and show up in those ways, you're a good person. And connecting with people is one of the most important parts of that, because there's not a lot of opportunity to do good if it's just you.
Dude, 100%. Yeah. And I went through a period last year. I kind of went through a period of this where I was like getting really into the ultra cycling thing, and I knew I needed to train hard to like be on. And it got to off season, basically like winter. We were coming into winter. It was like early winter at the end of this past year, and I was just feeling like a sense of just frustration. Like nothing was working. I was like, man, I like hit my goals, but I'm feeling down. Like, what is going on? And I actually had a long chat with Catherine about this. Is I was like, look, like this has been great and I've hit all of my goals, but I feel absolutely drained because I've spent the entire summer and fall not engaging with my people. Like, I was turning down all kinds of fun opportunities to hang out, you know, and like when we would hang out, I would hang out for maybe an hour and then just be like, gotta go. Like, and sure, like I was sticking to what I told myself I was going to do. I was challenging myself to do hard things and I was achieving those things, but man, I just felt empty. Like I was being productive, but I didn't feel a sense of purpose in those things. So at the end of the day, I was like, I did a year like that, the super like hardcore athlete thing. And I was like, I can't do this. Like, I'm too much of a people person to continue on the train of like, every time there's a happy hour being like, nope, can't do it. Like, even if it is that hour, it's important, but I missed the investment, especially as like a pretty extroverted, relationship driven individual. I just felt like I was kind of missing all the marks outside of the few races and goals that I had set for myself. And at the end of the day, I think that's what kind of made me realize I was doing something wrong. I didn't have it in balance, or as you would say, like everything together all at once. I was like missing like small pieces of the puzzle, and those pieces, when they were put into place, I was like, wow, like, all right, I feel like a human again. You know, I'm not just a robot that's trying to perform.
Would you feel like, I'm going to draw on an example for me. I think my point with what I'm about to say is every person, whether you know it or not, needs other people. And I don't naturally do that. Whether it was my childhood trauma or, you know, I got teased a little bit. I liked playing video games. I isolated myself socially a lot when I was young. And granted, I'm okay isolating myself socially for the most part, right? I can do well. I think that's one of the reasons why I hate to use the term high achiever, but I'm a high achiever, is because I'm okay being by myself for long periods of time. And at times I prefer to do that. And I know you're a bit like that, but what you said there made me wonder, do you feel like you know, you're a creature of friendships and relationships? Have you always been like that?
Yeah. And the interesting thing about that is, Um, I'm an adopted only child. So like I didn't have siblings around and I always kind of desired that. Maybe if I had siblings around, I wouldn't be this way. But yeah, dude, I always wanted to like, mom, into school tomorrow. Can I go over to so and so's house? Can I go do this? Can I go do that? I was in Boy Scouts. I was in Young Life. I was just always interactive, like at the skate park, snowboarding, like you name it. Like I wanted to be outside. I wanted to be with people. And I think I've always been a bit more extroverted than most. Um, However, I will say in my later years of life, I've noticed um, that I also draw on the energy of others, and I'm an empath. So, like, if people are feeling really down, I'll start to feel really down. And um, I heard this phrase once here to make a giving, not make a living. So I'm always my desire is to give to individuals, but I have since become a bit more introspective and noticing when, okay, I've done a lot of that. I've been around a lot of people. I've tried to give a lot, and I'm feeling pretty cooked. I need time for myself. So that was something I don't think I noticed early on. And that would lead to like hanging out with the same people over and over and over and over, day after day after day after day, until we wanted to kill each other. So like now I'm like, okay, I understand how those relationships work too. And there is a time and a place to hit the off switch and say, hey, like catch you in a week, and come back to those things. But yeah, I've always desired closeness. I've always desired relationships. I've always desired fellowship. And like, I think that's why things like dinner around the table, meeting at coffee shops, being forward facing in the bike industry or the snowboard industry, those have always been crucial to me because I'm also a creator, but I feel like I ride this fine line where a lot of creators aren't necessarily like extroverted. They tend to want to like create and kind of be in their own bubble. But I feel like I've got both outlets in my life, and it's been really cool. But it's also been a huge learning curve. And I think actually, like through the pandemic, like experiencing that time of like just complete solitude and like lessened friendships and just a change in the pace of life, I've noticed that I am a bit better at just like chilling on my own, especially now in this ultra distance thing, dude. Like half the point of it is to go out and be by yourself, be self supportive. And I love that. And I love the challenge, but I also love people. So it's kind of a strange, like collective. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a really interesting thing that I'd like to know more about. And I mean, like that last podcast you guys did on that Enneagram stuff, I need to jump on that. I need to do the test to kind of learn more about myself in that way. But yeah.
Yeah. There's something interesting about that perspective. In jiu-jitsu, my instructor taught me early on, he would say, if you're a small guy, you should learn how to fight like a big guy. And if you're a big guy, you should learn how to fight like a small guy. And basically the point was, don't limit yourself to your capabilities or your characteristics. You should try to branch beyond that. And I think there's something to that idea of it's important to try to uncover your nature. Like I'm more of this self-isolated type. I'll stick to myself. I don't really need that much in way of people or things to feel okay. And I have seen immense growth in an effort to get outside of my comfort zone, talk to more people, work on my way of speaking, work on connecting with people. I still sometimes I'm like, dude, look people in the eye when you talk to them. I tend to like look around, right? It's just not my nature. And on the opposite side of that, for anybody that's super extroverted and when they're by themselves, you got to turn music on or put a podcast on just to fill that dead space. It's a good idea to explore that. What happens when there's no noise and you're just sitting there.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome to me, but I would imagine some people who are listening, who hear me say that, think about what it is to be truly silent and alone. And it probably makes you stressed just imagining it. And I think exploring the opposite of your nature is a very important aspect to growing as an individual, improving yourself.
Yeah, I think, and that's the cool thing about it is your strengths are your strengths. You know them, and you're typically encouraged to go after something that is based upon your strength. Uh, but then there's the whole weakness side of things, and people tend to allow themselves to become victimized by the weakness, or if they're shown a job opportunity or like a perspective potential outside of their wheelhouse of strengths. I think people tend to stray away because they're like, oh, that's a weakness. I'm not very good at that. And it's like, yeah, okay, I understand that you have those weaknesses, but acknowledging them and being willing to like expand upon that, I think is just as valuable, because if you embrace your weaknesses, it does not allow for anyone else to weaponize them against you. So if you're totally transparent about what you have going on and where you're not strong, seeking help from people that are strong in those areas and trying to foster your way through it and at least giving it a shot, I think is way more valuable than just being like, oh, I can't do that. I can never do that. Like, I hate heights, but I got invited to jump out of an airplane for a friend's birthday, and I was like, dude, yeah, let's go. Like, why not? And it's funny, he doesn't mind heights at all. We get in the plane, I'm like freaking out. I'm like, holy smokes, like we're about to go up in the air and just jump. And then by the time we're up in the air, like once we're like there and they have the door open, I'm like fired up. I'm like sick. Like, all right, the fear is gone. We're just doing it. Like, and I'm ready to huck myself out of the plane. And he was like all stoked to do this. It was his birthday. And then we get up there, and they were like yelling at him because he had his hand on the door, like where the fuel line runs across the door for the airplane, like pulling on the fuel line because he didn't want to go. And they were like, let go, let go. And so he was like freaking out when he was fine on the ground. And I just thought it was funny how like one weakness and one strength all of a sudden flip flopped just based on the scenario and just based on the fact that like I had never previously exposed myself to that opportunity or that challenge. And yeah, you just don't know what you're capable of. Just because you have a fear of something, the way you react in a situation might be completely different than you expect when things become real. So yeah, I think it's cool to like lean into your weakness rather than just like push it to the side.
Yeah. The this is so stupid, but like the meme of fuck around and find out, it's so like you always find out.
You always
And
find out.
I think it's a mistake for people to not fuck around. Like you have to try stuff, man. And don't let the story you tell yourself about the potential outcome stop you from doing something that you feel in your heart, or maybe you don't even feel it in your heart. You just think maybe I should try it, and you do, right? That's usually the start to great things. And I would say it's very rare that you are the prodigal person who has always known what they want to do with their life. The iterations of what you'll want to do are going to change over the course of your life many, many times. And it's likely that you'll dabble with this for a handful of years, and then you'll move on to the next thing for a handful of years, and you'll lose interest in that and have to try something new. And if you don't develop that skill of being okay with stepping out of your comfort zone and trying something, it's going to be very difficult to maintain the level of pliability required to maintain a happy and healthy life. The change is one of the few things that unites us all. And I think Adrian Bosman said this on the show, one of the secrets to life is staying in tune with the uncertainties of it. Right. And you can just sort of ride that wave, as cliche as it is. That's the ticket.
Yeah. And dude, it's so true. I feel like it is just a narrative that we tell ourselves. And a lot of time we don't actually know if it's true or not, because we're not really the one writing the story. And I think regardless of what you believe in, that's the importance of faith, faith in whatever. For me, it's faith in the Lord. And like, I know that especially right now in this season of my life, so much is about to change. Like, about to get married. That means we got to find a house and start moving that part of our life. And like, that could come with career change. That could come with, there's all these things that are always fluctuating and always changing. So it's like, if you don't have something to like grasp onto, you don't have a belief, a faith system, like for me, that has been a huge part of myself being able to accept my weaknesses and allow them to be turned into strengths. Because yeah, I wake up daily. I have my kind of my routine with the prayer and the devotional and the coffee and just like time and quiet to assess like, hey, how am I feeling? What do I need to pray about? Where do I need to ask for help? Because I am not the one that writes the story, and the story that I tell myself certainly is not true. You know, like there's a path, there is a purpose, there is more than I can see, and being open to like expand your thought process beyond what you're limiting yourself to is inherently important day to day. Every single day you are going to run into decisions, and a lot of them are going to be ones you don't feel like dealing with. And it's like, well, if you don't have something to believe in or like a way to process that, you're going to get stuck.
Mm. And I think just being open to it, right? How many times have you and I met in person and I'm like, bro, I just started doing this new thing. It's going to be the thing that I do for the rest of my life. And I can't even think of an example. Like that's how quick things come and go. But that's just
Cool.
my framework, man. Like if something comes to me and I really dedicate time to it and I love it, my mindset is going to be, this is the thing and I'm going to figure it out. And ultimately what's going to end up happening is one time I'll be right. And all of the 12 or 20 times beforehand where I made those claims and, you know, something didn't come to fruition, I lost interest, then that doesn't matter because the one time it counted, it counted. And so, you know, whether it's this podcast or who knows, I might move to France and become some world-class baker. I don't know. But there's going to be the one thing that sticks and you feel really good with, and you do better than anything you've ever done before, and right place, right time, life circumstance, everything just falls into place perfectly, and it lands for whatever reason. And I think it's important to be open to the fact that anything you do could be that thing.
Dude, yeah. And for one, I feel like you've had a lot of ideas, but this podcast is definitely on the right track. So stoked for that. Um, but yeah, I think there, and we kind of, I feel like maybe touched on this the last time I was on, but like there is this like surrounding idea of, and like I'm even very deep in this, like the idea of purpose, the idea of impact is so big right now. And like, um, the productivity versus the impact you're having and how all that plays out. But like, I think we all have this desire to like make big waves when really we're just like making like tiny little ripples. Like you are a raindrop in an ocean. Like literally, like that saying is so true. Like you are making little to no impact. And that's not to discourage anyone. And that is not to say that you shouldn't go after hard things and try to make a difference, because by all means, like that is what needs to happen. That is the lifeblood. That is the reason the world keeps turning, is because there are positive individuals. And occasionally there are people that make massive impacts. They do make waves, but there's something to be said about the people that find their purpose in being a mother, find their purpose in being the line cook at Burger King. Like there are these little things that you can do that you can still absolutely love and enjoy. And like you are making a difference in someone's day. Like even if you're the person that's like, you know what, like I love hanging out at my local coffee shop and reading books and just like chatting with the baristas. Like that's what makes me happy. Like, great, dude. Like you're probably crushing through reading material, first of all, but secondly, you're probably making those baristas' days, like hanging out, encouraging them. Like, so it doesn't need to be this massive tidal wave effect. Like little ripples accumulate. So if we're all desiring to make little ripples, eventually those little ripples come together to make a wave. You know, we just need the amount of people that desire to be good people in order to make a change. So yeah, I fully agree. I think it's like whatever you do, wherever you find purpose, like dig into that.
I don't know if I've talked to you about this, but I'm reading this book series called Red Rising right now. Have you heard of this?
I have not.
It's a science fiction book. It's a war in the solar system. There's so many things that go into it. There's 6 books in the series. I'm almost done actually with the fifth. But there's a character in the series. He's actually one of the main villains. But something he says, I pulled it up while you're talking there because it reminded me of it. In regards to life, this is what the quote is. All we have is that shout into the wind, how we live, how we go, and how we stand before we fall. And basically, this character who actually does horrible things is pretty much saying, like, who cares about life? We're just this little ripple, how you described it. Take that moment that you have and shout into the wind. And I think that many people think that how loud they shout is what's important, but that's not true. It's the thing you say when you yell that's important. And it takes a long time to come up. It takes your whole life to come up with that, to figure out what it is that you want to say. And to your point, to give a real life example, we're coming up on a year of doing this show, and I feel like I have really gotten into the swing of things with it. I feel like I'm starting to become happy with how I articulate. I'm not quite where I want to be yet. There's still lots of work that I do towards it, but I'm starting to become happy with how I articulate. I think I'm getting better at asking questions. And the episode that came out the week before you and I are having this conversation was with Dr. Joseph Schwartz. It was on stress. And then I have one that comes out this week. I spoke with Professor Phil Reed. He is a professor in a university in Wales. And we talked about the effects of social media addiction and like the real costs of being addicted to social media. Super fascinating conversations. And I love talking to you and speculating with you about things in life because it's fantastic. But I get so much energy out of being able to speak to people who are researching these topics that I'm fascinated by.
Dude, yeah.
And really when I talked to Joseph Schwartz about the physiology of the autonomic nervous system and what happens when your body releases cortisol when you have a stress response, and the difference between the amount of stress that you experience in a given instance and repeated exposure to small stresses and how that affects you long-term and short-term. When I did those 2 episodes back to back, I've talked to researchers before. And I think part of this too is I'm getting better at the actual interview. So I feel a little bit more fulfilled by it. But I've never done anything in my life where the cliche of, it's not about the result of something, it's about the journey has held true. I mean, I know what that idea means, but I've had a hard time internalizing it. Like ultra marathoning, for example, I much prefer having run 100 miles than running 100 miles. But when I do those interviews and I get fired up to talk to people about social media addiction or stress response, I feel like I'm already doing the thing. And I might not be at the level that I want to be at with the podcast. The amount of people that listen to it might not be where it wants to be. But I'm seeing the self-development in the way that I want to, which is the better at orating, better at articulating, better at asking questions on my end. I'm also talking to the kinds of people that I would like to speak with more frequently. And I think that is so underrated. And I just want to say this because I'm somebody who has shouted that into the wind, which is find the thing that you enjoy doing and you'll never work a day in your life. I think that idea is so profound. And I have almost said it in the past because it was the right thing to say, and a lot of people say it. But that's true. And I'm lucky that at least right now in my life, I found a thing that can provide that for me. And so this all loops back to our conversation of earlier. You just have to keep trying shit out until something sticks because it will. And I think where most people fall short is they just don't try anything because they it's too hard or they don't know where to begin, or they tried a million things before and nothing's worked. It's like that's the case for everybody. You just have to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, man, I feel like people either don't want to try anything or they try things and don't give it enough time. I like the saying, it came into my head one day on a ride. Everybody wants to throw their pasta against the wall before it's done. And it's not going to stick. It's not done. And if you're trying to undercook it and not give it the time it needs to actually develop and become what it needs to be to catch on, like there is a learning curve. there's a curve to get to where you want to be. It is not a linear process, and it is not something that you can expect overnight. So when people give up easily, it doesn't allow you to really unfold your potential. Like, imagine, like all these people that write books, if like they hit writer's block twice and then just gave up on the book they were writing, we would be down a lot of really good books. If Elvis like started making music and like the blue suede shoes weren't moving right and he just gave up and hung them on the wall, like we wouldn't have Elvis. Like, come on, like you gotta push through the adversity, and like not to be this like preachy adversity is your friend guy, but it is. And there's no other way around it. Like if you aren't willing to try new things that are not your strengths, then you will forever be limited to like whatever it is that you've known forever. And like some people are okay with that, and I'm not. I don't know. So I think there is a separator there. There is a determining factor of like, are you okay doing what you've always done? Is that where you find happiness? If so, awesome. Are you okay doing what you've always done, but you're not happy and you need to dig deeper? That's going to take some discomfort, and that's where we need to really lean into things. I don't know. I feel like, do you feel like since the pandemic occurred that people are like less likely to stray outside of their comfort zones and like go into another lane? Do you like, I feel like I've noticed a lot of differences now where people are just like, I'm going to stay put because I'm really not sure what's going to come. I'm not sure what's happening next. I'm not sure if life is going to go in reverse like it did before.
I actually kind of had this conversation with somebody, one of my clients in person recently. Things are different since after the pandemic. I don't know what it is. I see it in everything though. I think there's lots of positives and negatives to it. Sometimes it's frustrating. I don't know what it is. I think I will be having conversations with people about stuff like this more frequently though, because there is a bit of a, let me just give you the example we were talking about. This client of mine was closing on a house and they had to get some inspection done, and they had scheduled this thing long-term in advance, and it ended up like not working out. The person canceled on them last minute, and they were like, hey, like this isn't really going to work for us. Like we need to get this thing done. We're moving a lot of money to pay for this thing, whatever. And that was his comment, was like, things have been different since the pandemic. He's been invested into real estate and other things like that for a while. And I would agree with that. There's like a little bit of laxness on work. I think the work-life balance stuff drawing to the forefront of people's attention is important. It's something that we didn't have before. I think wide scale as a society, most of America had a bit of a New York East Coast work hustle grind mindset, and that seems to have dissipated at some level, and I think that is productive. But both personally and professionally, I think people are a little bit more lax, right? Give yourself some grace. That's obviously important, but when we're talking about is two different things. When you and I give ourselves grace, it is to stop being so hard on ourselves because we do too many things, or it's to pull back a little bit and enjoy a drink with our romantic partner. Like those are all very productive things. But I think a lot of people that aren't in a good place, be it financially or mentally, they don't realize that actually leaning into the harder stuff is going to be the thing that gets them out of that. That might be like bigger than the question you asked, but that's sort of where my mind went. I think it's a big widespread mindset thing that all touches on the same thing, and it has been since the pandemic. But there is this laxness, and I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I think time will tell, right? We are kind of this, like when we die, we're pretty much going to be the same age after about 100 years, I know you're a little bit older than me, but we are very much an experiment. I don't know if anything like this has ever happened before. Nothing like this has ever happened before, especially with the level of connectivity that we have because of technology. So we'll see, man. I just talked to, this comes out this Friday, Phil Reed. I told you he's the social media addiction guy. We talked a little bit about this idea in that conversation too. We'll find out. But I do think that the thing you just said and the idea of social media addiction and be it professional or maybe lack of professionalism, all kind of the same thing. And we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, I'm kind of on the same page here. Is like I can't really pinpoint it. I can't put a finger on it, but there seems to be some like lack somewhere, whether that's like through like a pseudo productivity level where productive is really just confused with busy right now, or uh, there's almost like tinges of this like softness where people are like, no, like I don't know about that, and uh,
Personal
there's
responsibility.
always there seems to be like a lot more reserve, and like people aren't willing to like be as much of a team player often as I feel like in the past. Like people would typically, like I see this a lot in the place that I work, is if a ball is dropped in someone's position, people aren't like really jumping to lend a hand, which kind of bothers me because I think as an individual and who I am and how I was raised, like if someone needs help, like regardless of your job description, like if you're on the same team, like you should step in, you should help. And sometimes, yeah, I mean, I get it. Like sometimes there are things that are beyond your ability, but the willingness to like be there for each other seems to be kind of lacking in a sense. I don't know. I feel like we can deep dive on that super hard, but
yeah, well, something it reminded me of was, I think anytime you put truth before making somebody or yourself feel comfortable, that's a mistake, because I'm going to use like a kind of a fringe example because it's easy to understand. And I feel comfortable defending this position because I'm a fitness professional. But it's no secret that having a healthy body fat percentage, eating good quality food, following some sort of exercise protocol, those things are going to make you live longer and they're going to make you healthier. And, the average person is obese or overweight at least. And that's in America. And that's a problem. Both the type of person that you have to be to not care enough about yourself to want to take that serious is a problem. And I think that a fitter, it's not some requirement to be in shape, but I do think it's weird not to want to take care of yourself. And I think that it's because sometimes people are putting, again, their own ideas of comfort and making themselves feel okay mentally at the avoidance of reality. And I don't know. I worry about that.
yeah, I agree. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, like mental health has always been obviously an issue from the beginning of time, and it always will be. But I think right now we're in a bit more of a hole than we were prior, just because of the things that we've been through. And I think a lot of people are grasping things and are unwilling to let go of them, in odds that they might never see them or feel them again. And that just goes back into the like fears pool, risk and reward always have a balance and a payout, and you have to decide which way you're going to go. So yeah, I guess I always lean more towards the side of risk, and hope that the returns of investment are good. But yeah.
Well, man, I'm looking down at the clock. That went by really fast. We didn't even talk about you getting engaged. Maybe we should have to do another podcast episode sometime on marriage and relationships and that sort of thing.
We could cat myself and you all in one pod.
That would be sick.
That would actually be super sick. Yeah.
I'm not going to commit to doing it in person because that's, Cayman might be pissed off at me if I say, let's do it in person, but that might be a good one to do in person.
That would be fun. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, dude, I appreciate you so much. I love you. We've, you're probably one of the, you're one of the first guys I would call if I was in trouble. And I thank you for, your relationship to me and, always reaching out and being able to stay in touch. But before we sign off, you have a lot of your ultra distance cycling stuff coming up. Just give people listening a brief overview of what you have coming up, where they can go to check out your journey, keep up with all the things. I know that there's a bit of philanthropy work, I guess, associated with some of the rides that you have coming up. And I'd love for you to be able to share that with people.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first off, I love you too, dude. I appreciate this. This is always fun. I feel like our conversations could turn into 4 or 5 hour podcasts, but yeah, got some big rides coming up this year. I've kind of limited myself to a handful in order to aid Kat in a bunch of her big races. I joke, but I'm also quite serious that I'm the second best athlete in our relationship, and she's
you're the
on
trophy
right track.
husband, man.
Yeah, hey, I'll take it. I'm here. Same race, same pace. We're in it together. So firstly, I'm a flex that she just set a fastest known time in the high Atacama Desert in Chile. She did a 20,000 foot peak. She had never been out of the country or at altitude and set an FKT on this route, both the ascent and the round trip. So nuts. So she's got a lot of big races coming up that I'm going to help her with. So I'm going to be running a little bit, doing some pacing, doing some crewing, which I personally love. And then for me, I've got, I would say 3 key ones this year. The first one is this Sunday at 6 p.m. I'm doing a 24-hour ride on my mountain bike around the local trail system here to raise funds for my buddy Derek, who was hit in a hit and run while out on a cycling training ride. Some pretty severe injuries. So just in order to kind of help him and his family, I'm doing this fundraising ride, 24 hours of mountain biking nonstop. And then end of May, I'll be going to Kansas for Unbound XL. It's a 350-mile gravel race, also unsupported. And then the big one, the icing on the cake, is going to be November. I'm going to Chile to race through Patagonia Verde. It's like the Chilean fjords, kind of in the Andes. And that's a 620-mile race that I'll actually be doing as a pairs. I've never done a pairs race, but my friend Emily and I are going to tackle that. That's also unsupported. So pretty much all the events I do draw on self-provision and looking out for each other if you're in a pairs. But yeah, man, just all off-road cycling. Pretty stoked. I just love long hours on the bike, the rolling buffet.
Right on, man. Well, as always, I'll plug all that stuff in the show notes below for anybody who wants to check it out. But man, I appreciate you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close it out?
No, man, just keep doing what you're doing. This is one of those things. Each episode is a ripple that will eventually create a wave. So excited to hear the rest of the episodes as they come. Thank you.
Roger that, dude. I'll try to keep it up. Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode with Jason. He is one of my favorite people to have on, and it's always a good conversation when I get the opportunity to talk to him. If you guys are watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on our notifications so you don't miss our weekly uploads. And if while you were listening, you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone you love, perhaps your grandma. See you next time.